Hi, and welcome to another episode of My Take. My name is Taiwo, and today I want to talk to you about communication between couples, between friends, between co workers, and in pretty much any relationship that you find yourself in. There are certain universal principles or positions or viewpoints that we should adhere to make our communications very effective and most profitable. And so I want to start by saying the first thing I want to look at or suggest to us, and I want to take this from a very good book that I read a while back, and I recommend that you read it if you haven't read this. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And my first point I want to explore concerning communication is that you must actively listen to comprehend the point that's been made by the other party in your dialogue. You must actively listen to grasp or to comprehend the point that's been made by the other party in the dialogue. In the last episode, we answered some questions about relationships, and one issue that we really didn't explore, and based on the feedback that many folks wanted me to talk about, is this issue of communication. And so the first point I'm making regarding that is that you must actively listen to comprehend what the other party is saying to you in that dialogue. I referenced a book earlier, and in that book, one of the 7 habits is that you must seek first to understand before you are understood. Again, his point, or one of his habits, is that we must seek first to understand before we are understood. This means you really listen to understand what the other person is saying, regardless of their good or not so good communication skills. The point is, I'm trying to listen to understand what the person is saying, but they may not be saying it correctly. They may not be tactful in what they're saying, but because I care to understand what they're saying, I'm able to get past the poor nature of their communication and understand or grasp or comprehend the point they're making. And if you notice, this then requires some level of emotional maturity or intelligence on my part to sift through the waffle and to hear what they're saying. In fact, I want to say, when you habitually do this, you actually run the risk of then telling that person, maybe at a different time, when everything is good and you're both maybe in a playful atmosphere, and then you can remind them of whatever flaw you believe they exhibit, and then they are prone to hear you because they got the point. You got the point they were making in the original conversation. You were able to communicate effectively. They drove that point home. You both went away happy. But then you now come back and say, now regarding this thing, there was something I noticed that I want to bring to your attention, and they are more receptive to that rather than getting into it at that point and arguing because the way you're coming across to me is wrong, and so the point you're making we discard, and the nature of this, the communication becomes confrontational, and the whole purpose of the communication is defeated because we then get bogged down into something else. I want to read to you a verse of scripture that is fantastic, and it's a well-known verse of scripture, but I want to see if you grasp what the writer is saying. This is taken from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9. And again, the book of Ecclesiastes is written by King Solomon, the wisest king who ever lived, in the twilight of his years. He writes this in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 13 through 16. This wisdom I also have seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me, he says. In verse 14, there was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it and built great snares around it. Now there was found in it a poor, wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered the same poor man. In verse 16, Solomon contends, then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Did you get that? Some great king came to besiege a smaller city that was filled by just a small population. And there was a poor man in that city who is wise. For whatever reason, the poor man was always disregarded, but the wisdom that Solomon is describing in this story is perhaps those, maybe the generals in the army or those who were in charge of war, knew enough to ignore the bias that the society had against people who are poor, who are seen as not, if they are poor, then they can't know anything, they are no value, their words don't mean anything, they are inconsequential. But the general in the army was able to sift through all those biases and call from what that man is saying the wisdom that is still required to win that battle against that great king. And soon after the war was won, Solomon says the people forgot about the poor man again because he is poor and because he is not counted as anything, and people just kept moving on with their lives. So it's possible that there are times that, and I'll give you a scenario. Because I am male and you are female, then I can't hear anything you've got to say. I can't learn anything from you. Because I'm the adult and you're the child, I can't learn anything from you, so to speak. Because I'm rich and you're poor, then I can't learn anything from you. Those biases are built into the way we think. And unless there's a paradigm shift, I run the risk of denying myself the wisdom that's what the other person is saying because I think I'm better than they are, or maybe I'm older, or I am richer, or I am male and they're female. All of those biases run the risk of denying us the wisdom that person has. So you must learn to actively listen to make sure you comprehend the point that they are making. Those in charge of the war in that story were able to overcome their bias and listen to the poor man's counsel. That is the wisdom that Solomon was alluding to. I hope that helps you. That's number one. You must learn to actively or intentionally listen to what that party is saying so you can comprehend what they're really saying, and not come to them with a bias that I know, or they can't possibly have anything to say that's of value to me. That's number one. Number two, because you've firstly listened intentionally, number two, you only speak after you're sure you understand what that person is saying. You only speak, or I only speak after I fully comprehend what that person is saying. What we often do, because of our biases, is I assume I know what the person is saying, and before they finish making their point, in my mind, Based on my conjecture, I start forming a response to what I think they are saying rather than actually comprehend what they're saying and respond to what they've actually said. Did you get that? Oftentimes, and this happens a lot within couples or within friends, while they're in the middle of a heated, passionate conversation or debate or argument, one spouse, rather than truly listen to what the other party is saying, they start forming in their minds, even though they are quiet for a moment, and present the illusion like they're listening to the other person. They really aren't listening. They're just watching your mouth. So the minute you stop talking, they respond with what they thought you were saying, to what they thought you were saying, rather than responding to what you really were saying. So the first point again is you must actively listen to comprehend what the party is saying. Number two, that you only speak after you have truly comprehended what they're saying, lest you speak or respond to what you think they are saying and not what they truly said. Okay? And number three, having said these two things, then implicit in communication is the attitude, or the attitude of humility, that I have some level of deference to the party that's communicating with me, and that then means, and because I'm humble and I'm willing to hear what they're saying, you run the risk of learning even more than you expected to learn by what they are saying. Does that make sense? Because I'm humble about I'm humble in my communication, the other party may realize that my questioning or my conversation is not betrays a lack of full comprehension of the subject matter, and they, out of a desire to bless, because they see my humility, will share more with me or tell me more about what I'm saying, and I am richer, or I learn more, or I have a better understanding of our conversation. The alternative to that, when you're proud, is people realize that you only want to hear what you want to hear. And so they run, and then they end up telling you what they think you want to hear and not what you really need to hear. I hope that makes sense. I want to read you a story in the Bible. It's a bit of a long read, but I'm hopeful that this will illustrate the point I'm making. Now, there's a king in the Bible called King Ahab. At some point, he realizes that there's a parcel of land, or there's a little village that belongs to Israel, and that village is still under the rulership of another king. And so Ahab then calls another king that he has some allegiance to, or his what would you call it now? Folks that they have strategic alliances with, so to speak. And the other king is called King Jehoshaphat. So King Ahab invites King Jehoshaphat to come and engage in this battle over this other king with him, so they can take back the land or the city that belongs to Israel. And I'm going to take this story from 1 Kings chapter 22 and from verse 5. 1 Kings chapter 22 and verse 5. It's a long read, so I'm going to be skipping over some verses to get to the point, and I hope you catch it. So also they get together and they're about to go to war. Jehoshaphat pledges to Ahab, all of my army and its capacity and its competencies and its skills and the armory are all yours. So we'll go to this war together. Now from verse 5, also Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, please inquire for the word of the Lord today. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said to them, shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to fight, or shall I refrain? So they said, go up, for the Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king. And Jehoshaphat in verse 7 said, is there not still a prophet of the Lord here? that we may inquire of him. So the king of Israel, who is Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, there is still one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of the Lord. But I hate him, because he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say such things. Down verse 14. And Micaiah, so they sent, let me preface that. So they sent someone to go call Micaiah to come and tell them what the word of the Lord is. Remember, there are 400 prophets who have all said the same thing to Jehoshaphat and Ahab to go up at once, and they will win this battle. But Jehoshaphat is not convinced. He asks, is there no more prophets in the land? Ahab says there's one guy, but I don't like him. He's always prophesying ill concerning me. So we take the story from verse 14, when the person goes to Micaiah and tells him, 400 other prophets have said such and such and such to the king. Please, when you get there, say the same thing to the king. So we are all in unison. We are all in one accord. And Micaiah said in verse 14, as the Lord lives, whatever the Lord says to me, that I will speak. Then he came to the king, and the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall we refrain? And he answered, go and prosper, for the Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king. And in verse 16, so the king said to him, how many times shall I make you swear that you tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Then in verse 17 he said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each return to his house in peace. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that you will not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? Then Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said in verse 20, who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, and another spoke in that manner. Then his spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. The Lord said to him, in what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. Did you get that? 400 prophets who knew Ahab's mindset told him exactly what he wanted to hear. But there was one person who would always speak the truth. Ahab knew this guy would always speak the truth, but Ahab did not want to hear the truth. So in that communication, Ahab was not looking to hear the truth. He wanted to hear what he wanted to hear. But Jehoshaphat, who was a smart king, could see the dynamic between Ahab and those 400 priests while they said what they were saying in his presence. And he knew, because he knew who Ahab was, he knew Ahab's pride, and that Ahab was not good at taking good feedback. When those men were prophesying, Jehoshaphat could watch dynamics, and he knew that this is not the truth, that this communication is filled with lies. It's a recipe for disaster. So he insisted on looking for another prophet after 400 that he could trust. Now let me say this, because this example suggests that the prophets were lying to Ahab because of Ahab's pride and because they knew the kind of king that he was. But they are not justified to lie to him either. Because someone in a two-party communication, because one party may be proud, may like to hear what like to hear, does not then mean I'm absorbed of my responsibility by lying to them or telling them what they want to hear. I will speak the truth in love, but I will speak the truth. So communication does not, the fact that one party is not humble or they are flawed does not then mean I don't tell them the truth. Because if you read in 1 Corinthians 13 that talks about what love is, 1 Corinthians 13 says love is kind. And then it goes on to say that love does not keep record of wrongs, that it hopes the best, it believes the best. While that person is flawed, while that person is not being their best self currently, I will not respond to their less than stellar best by then, as it were, absconding or shirking my duty to be truthful to that person. Many times we do this because we think, well, if I tell them the truth, they don't want to hear. Micaiah proved the point. He knew Micaiah would tell him the truth. He didn't want to hear it, but Micaiah did not relent from speaking the truth. For effective communication, you have to be humble. And if one party is not being truthful, not being sincere, it does not absolve me of doing my part, of telling the truth in love, but telling the truth. I hope that helps. And number 4, the final point that I want to make is that in communication, your goal, my goal, must be to clarify or to improve that relationship and not to destroy it. My goal, or both parties' goal, really should be to either clarify or improve the relationship and not to destroy it. So in effect, you have to think win-win. Again, borrowing from the book by Stephen R. Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits, again, is you must think win-win. So when I communicate, my goal, my desire, because I always think win-win, is to either clarify or improve my relationship and not to destroy it. We have to resist the urge to win an argument and destroy or put the relationship at risk. Resist the urge to win the argument. If somebody's arguing, let them have their way, so to speak, because you want to be at peace with them. You're thinking this relationship is worth nurturing, is worth protecting. So whether it's a husband and a wife, whether it's friends, whether it's a colleague or a boss at work, whatever the dynamic, always think win-win. And so I am trying to either clarify our relationship to know where we are or how we see ourselves, or to improve on it, but not to destroy it, so to speak. And Proverbs 12:18 says, there is one who speaks like the piercing of a sword, while the tongue of the wise promotes health. There's one who speaks like the piercing of a sword, while the tongue of the wise promotes health. So sometimes we may say things in a bid to win, or because we have different personality types. So maybe I'm not sure which of those personality types. You might be phlegmatic, choleric, melancholic, and I forget the fourth one. But sometimes one of those, you may be kind of people that kind of assert yourself. You come across as though you are not very tactful. Watch those things to the best of your ability to reduce the sting or the impact of the words. But at the same time, like I said earlier, the receiving party, because the idea is to become better, I don't ignore the point you're making and get caught up onto the presentation and start arguing over how you said it, the way you said it. Those things don't move anything forward. We can start arguing or fighting or have an issue over styles. But like I said at the beginning, if you were proactive and you listened to the person, understood where they were coming from, responded to the point they were making, while temporarily ignoring perhaps their lack of tact, at some point in the future, on a later date, you can then bring that issue up and address it. But because they have learned to trust you, to know that you don't reduce their point to the presentation or things like that, they learn to trust you, and they can then trust your judgment and listen and learn from you and grow by the fact that they can trust you and they know that you think well of them. Like I said in 1 Corinthians 13, love hopes for the best, believes the best, and through love you get that person to convert or to become a better person. I hope this makes sense. There's so many things to consider when it comes to communication, but I think these four are so important and so crucial. We didn't talk about them in the last episode, but I hope these things are of value to you. If you have any comments, you can put them in the comment section below. You can send me a private email. I want you to subscribe to our channel, like us, click on the notification button so you can get alerted when there's a new video out there. And from me to you, this is my take. God bless you. Have a great week.